In the Middle Ages, the line between myth and reality was thin, terrifyingly thin. Medieval people didn't think of monsters as fantasy. They believed they walked the same earth, swam in the same seas, and hid in the same shadows. From chronicles written by monks to maps marked with warnings, these creatures weren't bedtime stories. They were accepted facts of life and faith. In this video, we'll uncover 5 medieval monsters people actually believed were real. From dragons scorching entire villages, to revenants clawing their way out of graves. These weren't just figments of imagination, they were lessons, symbols, and fears that shaped how people saw the world itself. So grab your torch, sharpen your sword, and step into a world where monsters weren't fantasy, they were reality. Dragons. To medieval minds, dragons were as real as wolves or bears. They filled bestiaries, biblical commentaries, and travelers' journals, enormous fire-breathing beasts said to lurk in caves, deserts, or mountain passes. Unlike the noble dragons of modern fantasy, medieval dragons were almost always creatures of evil, embodiments of greed, pride, and the devil himself. Medieval writers described dragons as winged serpents, scaled and horned, with the strength to crush knights in their coils and the breath to set fields ablaze. The Bible itself mentioned the dragon as a symbol of Satan, and artists took that literally. St. George's legendary battle with the dragon wasn't seen as a fairy tale. It was a moral lesson made real through faith and fear. In maps from the 13th and 14th centuries, unexplored regions were often marked with the phrase, "Here be dragons." To sailors, that wasn't poetic. It was a warning. They believed dragons lurked beyond the edge of the known world, monstrous guardians of forbidden lands. Interestingly, scholars today think many dragon myths came from something tangible. The discovery of dinosaur fossils, whale bones, or giant crocodiles that locals couldn't explain. But in the medieval world, no such logic existed. Every skeleton or mysterious footprint was proof, not disproof. To medieval Christians, dragons weren't just beasts. They were evil-made flesh, reminders of the chaos that lurked beyond God's order, and if someone claimed to have slain one, it wasn't science fiction, it was a miracle. The Basilisk. Of all the creatures feared in the Middle Ages, none inspired more sheer dread than the basilisk, the so-called king of serpents. According to medieval bestiaries, it was hatched from a serpent's egg incubated by a rooster, an unholy cross between land and sky, sin and pride. The basilisk wasn't large or dragon-like, but small and coiled, a snake crowned with a white spot on its head, marking it as a monarch among monsters. What made it terrifying wasn't its fangs or its size, but its power. It could kill with a single look. Its breath was said to scorch the earth and poison the air, and any creature that met its gaze, human, beast, or bird, would drop dead instantly. Even its reflection was deadly. Medieval writers warned that a man who tried to kill a basilisk with a sword might die before the blade struck. The only creature immune to its power, they said, was the weasel. Farmers were advised to release a weasel into any hole suspected of housing a basilisk. In some accounts, the crowing of a rooster could kill it too, a poetic punishment since it was born from a rooster's egg. To medieval scholars and theologians, the basilisk wasn't just a monster, it was a moral warning. It symbolized Satan himself, spreading death simply by existing. The idea that evil could destroy merely through its presence resonated deeply in an age obsessed with sin and salvation. Some historians believe the myth may have originated from exaggerated tales of cobras, especially those that spit venom. But to medieval minds, the basilisk wasn't a legend. It was proof that God's world had boundaries humans were never meant to cross. Werewolves. Long before Hollywood turned werewolves into tragic anti-heroes, medieval people believed they were very real. Cursed souls who roamed the forests when the moon was full, trapped between the shape of man and beast. In medieval Europe, stories of werewolves weren't entertainment. They were cautionary tales, whispered by firelight to warn of sin, witchcraft, and the thin line between civilization and savagery. According to 12th and 13th century chronicles, men who abandoned their faith, made deals with the devil, or failed in their Christian duties could be punished by transformation. They would grow fur, lose reason, and hunger for human flesh. Some accounts said it lasted for years, others for life. The curse could only be lifted through repentance or death. In France, the legend of the loup-garou became so widespread that church courts actually investigated alleged werewolf cases. One famous story told of a man named Basilisks, a nobleman who vanished for days at a time until his wife discovered his secret. He removed his clothes to become a wolf. When she betrayed him, he was trapped in beast form, a moral tale of betrayal and punishment wrapped in horror. Medieval bestiaries even catalogued werewolves as real creatures, describing their strength, cunning, and ability to mimic human cries to lure travelers. In a world where wolves already stalked the countryside, the thought of a human wolf made the fear that much sharper. To the medieval imagination, werewolves embodied what everyone secretly feared, that beneath the thin surface of faith and order, something wild still lurked inside every man. Whether viewed as demons, cursed sinners, or symbols of moral decay, the werewolf was more than a monster. It was a mirror, showing humanity's most primal face staring back. Sea serpents. For sailors of the Middle Ages, the open ocean was a realm of fear and faith. Beneath the waves, they believed, swam creatures so vast that whole ships could vanish between their coils. These were the sea serpents, the living embodiment of chaos itself. Medieval chronicles describe them as dragons of the sea, long as galleons, crowned with fins, eyes glowing like lanterns beneath the surface. Sailors returning from voyages in the North Atlantic swore they'd seen monstrous shapes curling through fog, while monks copied their accounts into bestiaries alongside whales and dolphins, as if all three were part of the same natural order. To medieval Christians, these serpents were often linked to the leviathan, the biblical beast said, to dwell in the abyss and serve as a symbol of Satan's dominion over the deep. Maps from the 13th century illustrated them curling around shipwrecks or rising beside the edges of the known world. To cross the ocean was to risk crossing into the serpent's kingdom. Even learned scholars debated their existence. Some believed sea serpents were real animals, enormous eels, giant oarfish, or whales mistaken for dragons. Others insisted they were demons sent to test the faithful. Every unexplained wave, every shudder beneath a hull, was a reminder that God's creation still held terrors unseen. Modern science may explain those sightings as misidentifications, but to medieval eyes, they were absolute truth. In a world where exploration meant gambling your soul and sanity, believing in monsters wasn't superstition, it was survival. The sea serpent was a warning from the deep, that the farther humans strayed from the safety of land, the closer they came to meeting the unknown. Revenants. Long before tales of vampires or ghosts haunted Gothic fiction, medieval Europe already feared the revenant, the restless dead who clawed their way back from the grave. To the people of the Middle Ages, revenants weren't spirits or illusions. They were physical corpses that rose again, bringing death and disease wherever they wandered. Reports of revenants appear in church chronicles as early as the 12th century. In England, monks recorded cases of villagers who had died suddenly and returned at night, pounding on doors, attacking livestock, and spreading sickness until their bodies were dug up and burned. Chroniclers wrote with the precision of witnesses, describing the corpses as bloated, darkened, and full of blood, horrifyingly tangible. Unlike saints, whose bodies miraculously remained incorrupt, revenants were seen as the damned, souls denied peace, driven by sin or vengeance. Some were said to be oath-breakers, murderers, or those cursed by the church. Others, simply victims of improper burial. To prevent them from rising, villagers would drive stakes through corpses, decapitate them, or place heavy stones on their chests. These rituals weren't myth. They're documented across medieval cemeteries in England, Poland, and the Balkans. Scholars today think these accounts may have stemmed from misunderstood natural decay, gases inflating corpses or blood seeping post-mortem. But to the medieval imagination, these weren't natural at all. They were warnings that even death couldn't contain evil. The Revenant was more than a ghost story. It was the ultimate nightmare of the Middle Ages, that the line between the living and the dead wasn't closed, only waiting to be crossed again. For medieval people, monsters weren't legends, they were explanations. Dragons explained the presence of evil. Basilisks warned of deadly pride. Werewolves showed what happened when man lost his soul. Sea serpents reminded travelers that the world's edges belonged to chaos, not man. And revenants proved that even death offered no escape from sin. In an age ruled by faith and fear, these creatures weren't fantasy. They were a reflection of human belief. Every story carried a warning, every sighting a lesson. To them, the world wasn't mapped by science or reason. It was shaped by morality, miracles, and mystery. Today, we call them myths. But in medieval villages, churches, and ships lost at sea, these monsters were as real as hunger or death. And maybe that's what makes them endure. Because long after the fears of the Middle Ages faded, the monsters never really left. They just changed shape.